something that most people think they have a natural inclination for, which is society, right? Like other people, friends, right? Groups, families. Hobbes doesn't think we have a natural social drive, inclination to be with other people.
The human being is by nature simply restless.
Yeah, restless. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's you're constantly looking for the next thing, right? That will make you happy for this moment, with the understanding that the subsequent moment you'll want something else.
Well, Chris, we have Hobbes Leviathan
Right.
on the docket today. This comes up in the junior seminar sequence. It's one of the many political works, modern political works, that are read in the junior seminar. It's called the Leviathan, and that ends up, we can talk about what that word refers to, but in some way the focus of this work as a whole, and it's a pretty large work, is the commonwealth, the human society, the political community, and the structure and the origin of that community. But it's striking to look at Hobbes' language at the very beginning. I just want to read this fascinating comparison he makes on page 3 in the introduction. So this is the opening to the work, and he says, "Nature, the art whereby God hath made and governs the world, is by the art of man, as in many other things, so in this also imitated, that it can make an artificial animal. For seeing life is but a motion of limbs, the beginning whereof is in some principal part within, why may we not say that all automata, namely engines that move themselves by springs and wheels, as doth a watch, have an artificial life? For what is the heart but a spring, and the nerves but so many strings, and the joints but so many wheels, giving motion to the whole body, such as was intended by the artificer? Art yet goes further, imitating that rational and most excellent work of nature, man. For by art is created that great Leviathan called a commonwealth, or state, which is but an artificial man." And so on. So this idea that the state is an artificial man, and man himself is a kind of, could be thought of as a kind of artificial creature made by nature, and he can rightly be called a machine because his parts are like the parts of a machine. And so we're led to think, presumably, the parts of the commonwealth are really like parts of a machine in some way.
And unless you think that he's just being metaphorical, he's very critical of the use of metaphors and making philosophical points. Not much longer than after this, maybe about 10, 20 pages, he's very, very, very critical of figures of speech. Now, maybe you can cut him some slack since it's the introduction if you're going to bend the rules a little bit, be a little more florid. Maybe in that circumstance, you let yourself, let your hair down, right, and use some metaphors. But I think he might be serious, that man, just like you might think of man as an artifact or a machine at least, right? The Commonwealth is just a bigger man, a bigger machine made by men, right? Made by the parts, I guess.
Yeah. It's a fascinating notion just at the outset to think about the Commonwealth or political society as an artifact. Because on the one hand, there's something true about that.
It's man-made.
It's man-made. It's human beings who are the originators of it. And who kind of make it go, so to speak. But then, especially for our students here coming at this text, they've got in the back of their minds Aristotle, whom they've also been reading in the junior year, who's very keen on this notion that the human being is political or social by nature. And Hobbes uses the word nature a lot. But he's got a very different view of man when it comes to the naturalness of his own society, or social relations.
It's a remarkable thing when you think about it. That you've got something that most people think they have a natural inclination for, which is society, right? Like other people, friends, right? Groups, families, maybe even little league teams. Different kinds of communities. And maybe to some extent, they think they have a natural desire to be involved in a city, although that's less obvious to most people at the beginning. But Hobbes doesn't think we have a natural social drive, inclination to be with other people, right? So it's going to be entirely a work of art if we are with other people in a social order, that machine. We have to actually think it through and decide this is what we want to do. Maybe make sacrifices to make it possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, but just as you were saying, when it comes to political society, Hobbes doesn't think man's naturally drawn to it.
Yeah.
And I do wonder, just reflecting on our current culture and the kind of world that our students are used to being part of, if that notion might not be so surprising to them. Yeah. It's surprising if you compare it to an Aristotle, but is it so surprising when you compare it to your own experience of political life?
Yeah, especially when you belong to a commonwealth that's as large as ours. Right? You don't feel, or even instinctively believe, you're all that connected to this entire United States, right? You might feel more connected to your city or hometown or something like that, but even that's imperfect. But when Aristotle's talking about a natural community, he's thinking about cities, right?
Yeah.
Each of them is a small, is the complete in some way he's imagining, and that's sort of where we feel fulfilled as human beings. Whereas nowadays the state is much bigger, and the government or the laws are more facelessly determined, right? Or at least they're not determined with a sense of the local needs, right?
Yeah, and Hobbes is kind of maybe an interesting kind of middle ground in some ways. Because presumably he's talking about something more like what we would call a country.
Yeah, right.
So in that way, it really eclipses Aristotle's polis or city-state, something like Athens.
Yeah, it's bigger.
A lot bigger. Comprises many cities.
Yeah.
Though probably not, nothing like the United States.
Yeah.
As we currently know it.
Currently.
So, going back to this opening, Hobbes doesn't move right into a consideration of the Commonwealth, but he gives a whole account of man, the nature of man here in Book 1. And he works through sensation and imagination, appetite, speech, reason, these various faculties. He ends up looking at what you might call the different virtues and religion, all prior to actually investigating the structure and origin of the Commonwealth or political society. And it's very interesting that he does that, but maybe the opening comparison gives us some insight as to why. If you really think that the Commonwealth is an artifact, then you got to start looking at what it's made of, and those who in some way originate it.
The artisans
themselves,
right?
Who are they're the artisans and the parts.
Both. I think that's right. And how you understand the nature of those artisans will help you understand the nature of the compact, or they might say the goals that they have in mind when they make this artificial person or artificial animal, as he calls him. He calls the state, anyhow.
Yeah, and on that note, one of the striking things he says at the outset has to do with appetite, and the way in which appetite, desire, he sort of equates with the realm of the voluntary. And we might hear that word and think of the will, and he uses the notion of the will, but he doesn't intend something distinct from what other animals possess here.
Or something free. He doesn't intend anything exactly necessarily free. Right?
That's right. That's right. And it's appetite that ends up being the real mover in the human being.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, what we want, what we instinctively want, you might say, or emotionally want. And to be fair to Hobbes, he's not pulling that out of thin air. Aristotle said the same kind of thing, that animals operate voluntarily, just not by choice.
Yes.
Right? So it's not a completely novel idea. If you're thinking of the voluntary as the same thing as desire, or whatever action that comes from within, from your own inner urges, right? You can kind of see how Hobbes might take that idea and run with it, especially if he waters down the human aspect. Right?
Yeah, that's right. So there isn't an assertion of a spiritual or immaterial form
Yeah.
of desire,
Yeah.
such as the Augustinian notion of free will, for example.
Yeah. In fact, there's an explicit rejection of those very
Yes.
things, right?
And similarly, no notion of an immaterial intellect.
Yeah.
So reason is a more complex form of perception or cognition
Yeah.
that you happen to only find in humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's nothing so different in kind from what other animals have
Yeah, that's right.
as to be a spiritual faculty.
Yeah, if I remember right, he says something like, imagination, when it's wedded to speech, produces reason and science, right? So it's not so much that what distinguishes us from the beasts is presence or absence of reason, it's the presence or absence of speech, I think, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating because speech comes up here as the fourth chapter. He starts looking at sensation and imagination, and then what he calls the train of thought, which is really a connection of various images.
Yeah.
And then you move right into speech.
Right from there, yeah. And then reason, right?
And then reason and science.
Yeah.
And what you said is exactly right, that speech or imagination as kind of sorted through naming is what becomes
the human.
the stuff of reason.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're reading that and thinking, oh, there's a chapter missing maybe here.
Yeah.
We go from imagination to speech.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
think that instead of reason coming after it should come in between.
You think there'd be some act of understanding that makes you start to assign vocal sounds to things, to thoughts, right, about reality, right? But he says, no, your imagination associates sounds, I guess by choice to some extent, right? But there's never an act of grasping things, of understanding something universal. In fact, I don't think he thinks it's possible to think universally. It's always thinking in images.
That's right. You can at best collate together various items in the world around you that are similar in some way and slap a name, a word
for each of them.
For each of them.
Yeah, so I can go that, call them all books, right? I've slapped the sound on the collective of those
Because they're
items.
similar enough.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's not as though you're naming a shared nature that they all possess.
Yeah, you're not seeing some single thing they all have in common, right? You're not grasping, I should say, some single characteristic they all have in common and associating a vocal sound with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So taking a step back, you start to see that, okay, the human being is really an advanced form of animal, which again, an Aristotle would agree with, but in a very different way.
Yeah.
But such that the passions, the appetites at the sensory level are still primary somehow.
Yeah.
And so then you think back to the notion of the watch or the mechanical piece.
Yeah.
And you start to see, okay, under this notion of the human being, you are getting closer to something like that. We are moved, we're driven by our passions, by our desires, and can be counted on to be moved that way.
Be predicted,
Yeah.
if you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he even says, this is right, he says at one point, you think it's a free choice that's resulting from a deliberation that led to a certain action, but really it's just the last thing you imagined and desired, right? You start imagining, I want this, I want to have the cake, I would rather lose some weight, etc. I go back and forth. Whichever one the action followed immediately after, that's the one you're going to do, right? Not because you settled on something, you've understood this is better than that, but you've simply imagined the one, and you've imagined both options, but the last one that somehow managed to result in an action is the thing you decided on in some sense, I think.
Yeah,
So it's not really a choice, it's just sort of what you did, right?
Your awareness, a particular form of awareness connected with what you did.
Yeah.
And I hadn't made this connection before, but as you were saying it, I was thinking to David Hume, who we read a little bit later in the seminar, but he ends up saying straight out that there's really no reason to hold to will, to any meaningful notion of will, because we don't experience ourselves as causes.
Yeah.
And he might have in mind something like Hobbes' notion.
Yeah.
The best we experience is, that last image, maybe image of ourselves before we actually did
Before
something.
you find yourself doing the thing. Right?
Yeah.
So like sometimes I wake up in the morning, I feel like I'm getting out of bed before I've actually decided to get out of bed. Right, I just sort of witness myself. Okay, I guess it's time to wake up. Yeah. So that's the norm, I guess, is what Hobbes is saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
At the beginning of chapter 11, we have a innocuous title to the chapter of the difference of manners. But he says something here very striking right off the bat. We are to consider that the felicity of this life, or happiness, consists not in the repose of a mind satisfied, for there is no such utmost aim or greatest good as spoken of in the books of the old moral philosophers. Nor can a man any more live whose desires are at an end than he whose senses and imaginations are at a stand. Felicity is a continual progress of the desire from one object to another, the attaining of the former being still but the way to the latter.
Yeah.
So you have these impassioned sensory desires, and by definition, they are meant to continue.
Yeah.
One leads to another.
Yeah.
That the human being is by nature simply restless.
Yeah, restless. Yeah, that's a good way to describe it. It's you're constantly looking for the next thing, right, that will make you happy for this moment, with the understanding that the subsequent moment you'll want something else, right? And that's happiness is that constant pursuit where the target is constantly moving or changing, you might say.
Yeah.
And it's not frustrated. He doesn't seem to think that. That sounds to me like it would be frustrating, right? I think this, when I finally have the drink of water, that now I'll be happy, and I drink the water and I feel a little better, but now I would like to have some cake, right? So you're moving on. It would seem like the constant moving on would be frustrating, but he's saying that's just how we experience it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We noted in class how there's a way in which we can see that as more resonating with experience now than ever, with the endless scrolling and the web links and social media images, where it's feeding into this kind of restlessness.
Yeah, it's playing the video game for the sake of getting to the end and then playing the next video game, maybe even the same video game
next level
again. Next level.
Yeah. So this again is contributing to that image of the human as a part in motion.
Yeah.
In motion on account of his or her desires. Yeah. But almost they're ready for placement within the Commonwealth.
Yeah. Almost a cog that's ready to be put in place in a machine, right? It's constantly. I mean, it's not like you're constantly in motion ever upwards or something like that, improving your happiness or perfecting your nature in any way, but you're constantly moving from one thing to the next, right? So you start to look kind of mindless. Like you could imagine a social engineer saying, I'm going to take this restlessness and plug it in here so it will serve the common weal in some way.
Yeah, so that gets us to the threshold of his account of political society itself. And he starts off by describing what he calls the state of nature.
Yeah.
Something like the human condition at its most simple and fundamental.
Yeah.
In some way prior to political society. Yeah. And it's a condition marked by, well, precisely one's unlimited desires.
Yeah.
Including the possibility that one might decide to kill another.
Yeah, if you encounter them or something like that.
Right, because of some infringement or perceived insult or
they've just got
violation.
something that you want, right?
Right.
I would like to have cake, he has cake, right? I'm going to take it from him, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's imagining then that state of nature naturally lends itself to a state of war, right? Always potentially, but actually as soon as you're interacting with somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So there's no ideal, there's no bucolic image of nature here. State of nature sounds peaceful, like you're sitting in a field enjoying the sunset or something like that. But this is you're solitary, and you encounter others who have the things maybe that you want, and if you want them, you will take them, right, by hook or by crook, right? You'll find a way. Yeah.
Yeah. So to identify the state of nature with the state of war it really is striking.
It's remarkable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty dark.
Right.
Right. Because once you say that human beings aren't naturally social, right, that we are each individual atoms, if you will, right, that don't want to belong with other atoms, what possible reason would you have for coming together with somebody else, right? Everyone would be a potential enemy, right? Mm-hmm. They would either have something you want or you have something that they might want, right? And so that's because we're all just driven by these desires, right? That could lead to a battle to the death. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's remarkable because you can think of a different sort of tradition that we're aware of and that's persisted maybe for several centuries now, where the state of nature, yes, would be regarded in a much more idyllic and positive way, a romantic sort of notion. And war would be perceived as something that's owing to precisely the realm of civilization and culture and society. And so the fact that Hobbes locates the state of war within the state of nature says something too about where he's going with the idea that the Commonwealth is it is the way in which to avoid this. It's the peaceful state, right?
Yeah.
It's the one that we should want. And so he gets there by introducing the notion of the contract. Which is where you have all humans as equal, and this is a point he really stresses, some fundamental equality to all human beings, and that their part of their equality consists in their all being capable of surrendering the freedom, the sort of unlimited freedom they possess in the state of war / nature, mutually surrendering that for the sake of a shared defense against one another, kind of protection.
And maybe defense against external forces as well. But that's right.
And he says that the person who carries that power to ultimately protect or defend is the sovereign.
And that's, in a way, the sovereign is the artificial person you've made, right? At least insofar as he's the one in whom we have all agreed to invest the authority of destroying people when they violate what would become the laws, right?
That's right. Hobbes he's one of the first of these significant political thinkers to invoke the notion of a corporate person. So much so that he even has a chapter devoted to that notion of personhood before he addresses the nature of the Commonwealth itself. I was just trying to find it, but when he gives a definition of the Commonwealth, he defines it as a person.
And the famous frontispiece artwork of the Leviathan has an image of the king, right? He's holding a scepter, right? And he's got a head, but his body is made out of people, right? It's kind of a remarkable image, right?
Yeah, because that's part of what's going on there is that he toggles back and forth constantly between the sovereign, thinking of the sovereign as an entity that in some way is really other than all of the citizens, because none of them are the sovereign. But at the same time, in another way, the sovereign, he wants to say, is nothing but the collective will of all the citizens, because it was their mutual contract that originated the sovereign in the first place.
That's right. And his power is really, as an effect of what you're saying, is really nothing more than the sum of their individual powers, right? So my right, if you will, he'll even call it a right, to destroy you if you have something that I want, right? And your vice versa, right? That right has been entirely handed over to the king now, to the sovereign, right? So we give it up. We can no longer destroy each other, right? But if you take my goods, right, then he can destroy you. He can deploy the power that I've and everyone has invested him with, right?
Yeah. And you could see how, if you accept the view of the human being as the kind of thing that Hobbes describes, a creature that seeks this unlimited freedom but is fundamentally ruled by the sensory passions, then you do need something like a sovereign, the way he's talking about it.
Yeah, especially if you're seeing those passions as essentially hostile. Right?
Yeah.
It seems like he's thinking of the dominant passions as being aggression, right, or maybe hatred even, and also fear, right? Well, he's not thinking about the passions of a love or affection or something like that, kindness, right? Those seem like contrivances or at least secondary emotions.
He really does relegate those. Sometimes he'll bring up familial relationships.
Connections.
And he always ends up casting them in terms of a more political structure, rather than maybe seeing things the other way around, which is what Aristotle tends to do, for example, a lot of the time. And it's not clear to me fully why Hobbes doesn't take up those more positive emotions. It might be precisely because the view of the Commonwealth that he wants to end up with is one that couldn't be based on
affection or
fundamentally.
kindness. Yeah, maybe that's right. Yeah, because he's trying to stress the absolute power of the sovereign, and I guess maybe that would be hard to sustain if you're paying attention to a natural feeling of compassion or affection for other people.
Yeah, it seems inevitable that you would get to some notion of a truer notion of an actual common good if you were to bring in affection as a principle.
Yeah, that's right.
And then the citizens and the sovereign couldn't help but have some mutual stake in the state and in the government. In a more kind of responsible manner, I guess.
Yeah, because he's imagining the reason you come together, and really at the end of the day, the only reason you stay in the Commonwealth is because you're naturally in this sort of defensive crouch as regards all your neighbors, right? Your doors are kept locked at night, right? And you don't trust people around you, right? And the sovereign is there basically as a police force, right?
Yeah, it's reflecting on the fact that he calls it a person again, and I wonder if Hobbes wants to reserve that word more for the sovereign than for any of the citizens.
Yeah, I wonder.
Because the notion of the person is connected with a certain form of ability, maybe even a kind of free ability. Won't be free again in the Augustinian sense, the Thomistic sense.
But you have a dominion or something like that. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so he would be the only one really worth being called a person.
Absolutely, at least,
Yeah.
Because he does think that when you and I enter into the Commonwealth and we give up our right to take what we want or do what we want, we do retain certain rights, if you will, right, or certain freedoms are still there, but not freedom finally over your own life. I mean, I think he says that the sovereign always has dominion over your life. He could send you to war and he can execute you, right? He can do all these things finally. Yeah, but he lets you pick your career. At least he can. Lets you keep your career. I suppose in theory he could take that from you if he has some need for it.
Yeah. Yeah, so then Hobbes realizes that a looming challenge to this whole account has to do with Christianity, religion.
Yeah.
And so he spends a lot of time in this work talking about the Christian view of things and what you might call the Christian Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And presumably that's because this question would naturally arise for Hobbes. Well, we here in Europe, most of us are Christian.
Yeah.
How do we recognize the absolute power of the sovereign, but at the same time recognize what you might say is the even more absolute power of God or of the church and of the demands that religion places on us.
Yeah.
And so he's got to go into this elaborate consideration of Christian revelation.
Yeah.
He spends some time looking at Scripture, and then finally this idea of the Christian Commonwealth.
Yeah, I think that's right. And he's even got his eye on that, I think, from the very start of the text, when he starts, the first chapter talking about sensation and imagination, et cetera. As you were pointing out earlier, there's no spiritual soul here or incorporeal soul. And one of the ways he gets to that conclusion is because he says, the only thing you ever know are sensory, particular, material things, right? And he says, words like spirit really are just confused uses of the word wind, right? And things like that, right? He says you were duped into certain things that you can sense with your hands, like breezes, right? But you can't see, into thinking that there is something that is literally immaterial, right? And he says the intellect never gets to such things. The intellect is really nothing more than speech with imagination, right?
Yeah.
And so he rules the immaterial world out of court, if you will, from the very beginning of the text by that initial understanding of human nature.
That's right. Yep. And when he talks about religion, again, early on in book 1, he gives a little listing of the reasons why men would become religious.
Yeah.
And let's see if I can find it here. Fear has a lot to do with it, but he says the natural seed of religion consists in opinions regarding ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts. Yeah.
Ghosts.
Yeah.
Ignorance of second causes or natural causes, devotion toward what men fear, and taking of things causal for prognostics.
Yeah.
So there are these misconceptions,
Yeah.
fears, superstitions.
Yeah, superstitions. Yeah.
That's all that lies at the heart of religion. So he's somehow able to say that in book 1, but then wants to give a real kind of lip service to Christianity.
To Christianity and to even God. I mean, he comes dangerously close at a couple points to saying God must be material. And his logic kind of pushes him towards saying that, but he never quite wants to lay down that card, I think.
I think that's right, yeah. But what you say is so important about his ruling out any notion of the immaterial. And one of the ways we see the significance of that later on is that when it comes to claims, so many of the claims regarding Christianity and even differences of opinion within the Christian realm, well, they're simply not the sorts of things that human beings can figure out. Because our perception is limited to the sensory. And so someone's going to have to make a judgment call. And of course, that's going to be the sovereign.
The sovereign, yeah. Yes, Hobbes is despite the fact that he's we'll say not an Orthodox Christian, he is quite happy to confuse church and state, to blend them, right? The church and the state are finally the same thing, or the supreme decider in matters of religion, right, is the head of state, right? The sovereign is, you might say, the Pope. Right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's why, well, to further concretize this potential objection to Hobbes, he knows that he has to deal not just with the claims of religion and Christianity, but specifically Catholicism. Because Catholicism is this interesting case where you have something like a commonwealth. You've got this structured hierarchy, and you've got a sovereign, the Pope, at the top of that. And there are claims made that transcend national boundaries. And so it's almost as though you have a rival commonwealth in Catholicism.
And claiming allegiance of some of your citizens, right? Obviously, Catholicism is in decline at this point in English history, because Henry VIII had separated the Church of England probably 100 years before this, maybe more than that. But the Catholics are a minority at this point, but you might say they're spies for an enemy nation, right? If you're thinking about their allegiance to the Pope. And it's probably true to a lesser extent of other Christian communions within England, right? That they might seem subversive vis-a-vis the established church there in England, right? Whether it's whatever Presbyterians or various other groups.
Yeah. And linked to that, I suppose, would be the experience of the wars that he alludes to, which are religious, at least to a great degree in nature, and sort of within the Christian fold. And so there's something, well, of course, horrible about that. And it's a real scandal. And so Hobbes.
And maybe just add really quick that they're religious sects that are fighting, and they're also disagreeing about about the nature of the Constitution of England at that time, at least to the extent I understand it. It's a lot of it's about people who think the king is supreme, others think the parliament's supreme,
Yes.
right? And so a lot of these civil wars, right, have a religious core, but also a deeply potentially revolutionary aspect that is also something he's trying to address, because he is trying to establish very clearly the absolute rule or dominion of the king, right? Not parliament,
Yeah.
if you will, right?
Yeah.
Or if parliament, then I don't think he even tolerates that finally, but it has to be fully subordinate to the real sovereign, right? The one to whom you've given all your rights.
Yeah, there's that. I guess the example of Cromwell, the infighting among the English Protestants,
Yeah.
precisely between those who were pushing the monarchy and I think Cromwell was
Yeah.
pushing the parliamentary
Yeah,
side.
right.
They end up killing one
Yeah.
another.
And ironically, at some point, if I remember right, Cromwell effectively becomes the king. I mean, he's not, the king I think is executed or something. But at any rate, he still is the sovereign. He
Yeah.
still has absolute dominion at some point, even though there is a parliament under him, I think.
And that sort of thing points to a valid insight, I guess, that Hobbes has here, namely that one person is going to effectively take control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, you can see that in different forms of particularly totalitarian regimes.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of realism maybe
Yeah.
in that point.
Yeah.
And it's worth asking, I think, especially of the students as they read Hobbes, okay, what in here is false? What in here, is there something here that's true?
Yeah.
Is there something here that's maybe not true in the sense that it depicts things as they should be, but does it depict certain recurring patterns?
Yeah. In human
Right.
societies.
In human existence, yeah.
Yeah, it does seem like it keeps happening, although I don't know that anyone has ever said some of these things as baldly and explicitly as Hobbes does. That is, Hobbes will say that you have no right to revolt, right? And maybe there are some tyrannical nations where the tyrant would say such a thing, right? But I would think for the most part, that would be such an unpopular thing to say, right? If you have any weakness or anything tentative about your control over your nation, you'd be disinclined to say something like that. But it is the case that Hobbes is arguing, once you are sovereign, right, you have absolute dominion. As long as you can still exert control over the whole people, they will never have any sort of claim in the idea of justice or morality to overthrow you, regardless of who you're executing for whatever reason, I guess.
Yeah, in that way, Hobbes, someone made this point, I forget who, but Hobbes, you could see him as kind of providing a systematic articulation of how things should be structured if you were to support a Machiavellian type of prince.
Yeah, right.
Right, to allow for that type of sovereign to be and to exercise power and authority the way Machiavelli suggests.
Yeah, so systematic philosophy of Machiavelli. Machiavelli's own writing in the Prince and the Discourses is more informal, right? But this is really putting together the whole thought process, starting from first principles, right, that you could argue about. But it does sort of, once you stick to these principles that he has towards the beginning, it does almost inexorably lead to the conclusions that he ends up with, I think.
Yeah, it's worth thinking about this question that clearly there's something very deficient about what Hobbes is portraying here, especially when it comes to the nature of the human being.
Yeah.
And yet, at the same time, you can see, again, something realistic about this idea that if you were to ask, well, why do people come together into a society?
Yeah.
Well, a large part of it is going to have to do with things like protection.
Yeah, self-defense from your neighbors and from obviously those foreigners overseas, right? You'll want to protect you want to be able to, gather wealth, have a happy, content life, and that's going to mean you need some security, right? And someone needs to provide that. You can't be standing guard all night long. Right. Yeah, I think that there's something to that.
Yeah, so then the challenge is to see how to incorporate that sort of observation into a view of the human being and ultimately of politics that's truer to what we actually are.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and it's as though Hobbes doesn't want politics or the order of a political society to be messy. He wants it to be cut and dried, clearly defined rules. And what he's doing here is presenting things fairly cut and dried, right? Whereas it seems like if he's not right, if Hobbes is not entirely right, things are inevitably going to be a little bit messy. There's going to be conflicts. There's going to be tensions. There's going to be a potential tension between your religious ideas and what the latest governors or presidents or rulers are demanding of you, right? And so there's inevitably going to be some kind of tension you'll have to work through on a case-by-case basis or something like that, right?
Yeah, it's kind of extraordinary that Hobbes, you'd think by looking to the many centuries of history that he was aware of, he might have recognized that to a greater degree. Yeah. But in that way, he takes his place along with a number of other thinkers of this early modern period who really see themselves as initiating something new.
Yeah, something that's never been tried.
Yeah, a whole new way of thinking about a fundamental part of human reality.
Yeah. If we only just did it this way, right? None of those wars and all those maybe tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands that were slaughtered, right, during these wars, right? None of that would have been necessary, right? He keeps making passing comments to the civil wars that are going on while he's writing it. So you can tell he's motivated by, we need to arrange the civil order to avoid that, the stuff that's happening outside my window, right?
Yeah, and in that light, there's something, ironically, there's something very revolutionary about Hobbes. Yeah. Though he would,
and even noble,
the last thing he wants to see.
Yeah.
In a commonwealth.
Yeah, he wants there to be something. He wants the slaughter to stop. I think that's at least a big part of it, right?
Yeah.
And he wants peace, even if peace is finally a tranquility that's not much more than I can do what I want and you can do what you want, and we're not at odds with each other. We don't have to look askance at each other because we know the sovereign and the police force under him will keep things orderly.
Yeah, it's an important point. It's hard for us to think about the kind of religious and political experience that's surrounding him.
Yeah,
it's very foreign. In that way, he's a bit maybe like a Lucretius, right, who's slamming religion and the gods, but because of the bloodshed.
Yeah.
Right? You can sympathize with that sort of approach.
Yeah, that's right.
In ways. All right, thanks, Chris.
All right, thanks, Sean. That was good.